what's up, Team Tim? How's everybody this week? Tim Golden coming to you live from kind of gloomy New Hampshire this week, and definitely gloomy for me. Was taking the trash out this morning, popped something in my back, and every time I move, I know Alan's gonna chime in here, and like whenever Alan mentions a pain point, I'm gonna out wince. So yeah, but we're really excited to have Alan from Eureka Process. Wait a minute. Now you got a whole new thing going on, Alan. Tell me all about this. Who are you? What do you have going on? What's the deal?
Well, I put my money where my mouth is. I feel like processes can help any business, and I recently bought a nightclub with my wife and another partner, and I'm looking forward to seeing how a process-based culture is going to help food and beverage and hospitality, a very different culture than I'm used to.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. Thank you so much for that. Hey, so by way of introductions, back on the farm is our mustache mania doctor, soon-to-be, wannabe, expert of everything. Hey, Jesse, how are you, my friend?
Expert of everything except getting my mic to work. Hopefully it sounds all right. I'm doing well. It's a Friday. I'm a little bit sick right now, but it's sunny outside and we're here with you guys, so it's a good day.
Always a good day. And last but not least, our good friend, Mr. Cavello, Mr. Data Discovery Guy. Hey, Tim.
Hey, Team Tim. Number 2 here. What's going on? Gloomy here as well, New York City. Rainy weather. You don't get to work out as much. Just put your head down and work, right? Get out.
Exactly.
Do our things, right, Tim?
Yeah, it's interesting. What the hell were we debating in the green room? I felt a little bit of like creamy peanut butter versus crunchy, or pineapple on pizza. I mean, we were like getting really into it. So let's just start right there.
The nightclub aspect. I mean, I don't think I've gone to bed after 10 except for like IT Nation or one of these conferences, right? So foreign territory for me.
You get that nightclub vibe going on there with the background and the jacket. So
that's what I said.
It's honestly, the nightclub is very artistic themes. Like I have my wife's art back here, and she's big into explosions of color. So we have this black background, also her design idea. So it's going to be crazy and wacky. But the crunchy versus smooth peanut butter, Jesse said a word that I hate, the O word, which is so ops.
Ops. What is ops? Why do you hate that word ops?
Well, it's because of what you just asked. What the heck is ops? We have even when we give out our accountability chart templates, I used to have an ops box. And then I found out, perhaps even regionally, for some, ops or operations is finance and admin, and for others, it's service delivery, and for others, it's everything. And so I was kind of triggered because Jesse's like, "Oh yeah, ops and X ops, like so everything." What are you actually talking about? So Jesse, what are you talking about when you say ops?
Stack ops, Jesse ops, right? Like you put that in your post before, so.
Yeah, no, for me, it is. I mean, it's process, right? So I think that feeds well into what you're doing at Eureka Process. But to me, ops is a discipline and not so much a job function. So ops is a way to structure and regulate, or structure and normalize the way you do things for scale, profitability, and efficiency. If I had to choose a definition.
So wait a minute. We're talking about a process here today, and like, what does that look like? If only I knew a guy that wrote a book on. Oh wait, we do. Somebody wrote a book on process. Is that right? Maybe. Oh, look at that. The other P word. Hey, Alan, give a little plug for your book.
Process and the other
OPP.
Also process. It is available on Amazon and Kindle and Audible if you want the sweet, sweet sound of my voice in your ear for an hour.
And having had the pleasure of having the Audible version right alongside the paperback version, like having Alan in my ear for numbers of hours, like talking about process is like sweet, sweet, smooth jazz music, being the process guy that I am. So, so let's dive right into this concept of process. Yes, we kind of had the what is ops, right, Jesse? Like, I think you pointed out, like, it's more of like a not a function, but more of a like acumen, right? A mindset, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because based on the size of the organization, you will absolutely see operations people and operations departments, and you can really get into a bunch of different arguments. And this maybe for another show about is ops a strategic function? Is it a tactical function? Is it both? But to keep the discussion focused, I'm going to set that off to the side. But yeah, so I think it also includes, now it's just not process, in my opinion. I think that it also includes automation, which automation is kind of the next step of process. Once we have a process, we can automate that process. And I think that falls within ops, right? And so it's also defining modes and mores of communication as well. So Alan, I'll let you weigh in here. I've talked too long already.
Not at all. I love the fact that you did define that process first, automation is the next iteration.
Yes.
And perhaps a big pain point I see people come to me for is efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, efficiency. So what do you have now? And they can't tell me.
Right.
And there's a level of efficiency in just knowing what you have, communicating that to all, and creating that process-based culture. And then once you have that culture in place, we have the ability to make changes to make the process more efficient. But it's hard to make it more efficient. It's hard to automate it, which is a type of efficiency, if you aren't crystal clear on what that process requires.
What do you like as, I was going to say, this might be, I'm not trying to paint you into a corner here, so feel free to tell me to go fly a kite, but what do you like as a framework when you're working through process?
I have my own framework, the Eureka process.
Right to
honestly, honestly, any framework that gets it done is a great framework. Please use it. We start pretty simple. We recommend everybody create a process, meaning spend a few moments, and we even have a template you can download of just answering like who's in charge of the processes, where do you store them, how do you write them, how do you title them so you can find them and search for them. Make those decisions ahead of time, and then communicate that to all, and then stick to it.
So wait a minute. Well, hold on. You said I need to having a process document procedure about process document, isn't that like Department of Redundant Department, or talk a little bit more.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit more about like the why and the value of that, right? What does it do for me?
Well, absolutely. Keep in mind that processes really are for growing teams. If it's just yourself, even when it was just me in this business, I only had a couple of processes because I would forget how to do something. What becomes important as you scale is you have lots of people working together. So you can equate this to building a house. There's plumber, electrician, framers, foundation pourers, roofers, and you have to have blueprints. So they all work together independently. So now the electrician knows where to put the boxes and the cables to not get in the way of the plumbing. And so that's what the process is. It's the blueprint for your documentation and process systems.
Yeah, I love that because to trigger you again in an XOps approach. But seriously, I see so many companies that say, hey, we do have process, and they do, but it's kind of siloed process. Every department has a system for process, but they have a different system for process, right? And so when we start to say, hey, we're all going to document our process and we're all going to process our process the same way, that allows better cross-functional teamwork and those things working together. So, the electrician's not coming in and cutting studs out because they need to run electric through where the carpenter put it up. We're minimizing that go back work. So I love that. I love that concept.
Go ahead, Tim.
Wow. All right. So I was gonna take a little step further, right? So for those familiar with EOS and Traction, right? So as a company, as we're in our forming and norming stages of building out who we are, what we are, where we want to go, like what building a process on process does for your organization is it gives you a roadmap of normalizing the vocabulary, normalizing how things are done, normalizing nomenclature standards, gives you a reference point for you as an MSP to say, this is how we name our documents. This is how we store and organize. This is how we, by the way, classify our documents, whether it's internal, public, private, whatever. It gives us an MSP, even if I'm just a one-person MSP, hopefully we're going to grow, and we've started that forming and norming stages of our MSP as we start to move forward.
Tim was raising his hand.
What's EOS?
Employee operating system. It's a traction. It's a process. No, it's a method, and it's licensed, so I can't really talk ad nauseum about it. But maybe Alan could just maybe do a better job of it.
It stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System. It is much like a framework. It was created by Gino Wickman, illustrated in many books. Traction's one of them. Traction's kind of like the handbook in a textbook, and a companion book, Get a Grip, is more of a fable about how it works. Great reads, but it creates an entire system for running your business. Process is one of their 6 key functions in it. I actually think it's the weakest of it as we apply it to at least IT service providers, but a great system.
Yeah. So entrepreneurial operating. It's how do we run? Like, our computers have an operating system. Why shouldn't our business and our entrepreneurs as well?
So how much of, we talk about ops, right, Jesse, and scaling, and typically I think about 2 different people, right? Like an integrator and an innovator. And typically like an integrator is usually someone associated with ops, right? Like they're trying to fine tune, make things a little better, make things more efficient, as Alan said, or effective. Is that the case here, or is there kind of like this, lean startup, Silicon Valley, I'm sure you've read that book as well, Alan, taking experiments, right? Like tweaking and taking risks as we go. Are they separate people, or are they the same? Like in a company, right? Like where do you, we used to, I think, there's plenty of stories about like our experimental factory has got shit everywhere. And then someone will come in and clean it up later, right? Like as a startup or a small company, like you're taking chances, you're trying to figure out what works, what sticks, like fake it till you make it, right? You've heard all these different things early on. So like, where does that early on, like, how do you think about efficiency and process when you say, and that's why I was kind of surprised when you said entrepreneurial operating system, right? Because when I think about an entrepreneur, they're like, all right, let's go out and see if something works, right? And like see if I can build a business out of this. And they're grabbing and trying to do anything that like will actually, they're running little experiments as they go. Mm-hmm. So, how does that all come together?
So the first answer is I have to give you the classic consulting answer. Does anybody know what I'm going to say?
Depends.
It depends, right, Jesse? It depends. But what I think you're actually describing in my nomenclature is age and stage. Even at the beginning of the Traction book, it says, hey, this is probably more for you've been in business for 2 years and have at least 5 employees. Yep. Most of my clientele are not startups. It's a very different approach in startup mode. And then I want to go back and I do, even though, Traction and I are kind of competitive, or EOS and I are kind of competitive, they have some great concepts. And I love it from Gino Wickman's book, Rocket Fuel. He talks about the visionary and the integrator, with a really big difference being one's kind of the dreamer and the R&D, the integrator's kind of the doer. I like to joke the visionary has 100 ideas and the integrator's job is to tell him he's an idiot 99 times out of 100, and then implement 1 out of 100. Now, we also have the realities of small business. Those are 2 very different roles. And I'm going to misquote the book now, but I believe you said 16% of the population is capable of being a visionary, 8% of the population is capable of being an integrator, and 2% are capable of being both.
Hmm.
In a small business, the reality is sometimes we have to be both anyways.
Yeah.
Right.
We just might suck at one.
Mhm.
I've actually found that I enjoy either, but not both.
Interesting.
So I will change my hat and go, you know what? I'm in visionary mode right now. And then something will happen and I have to go the other way. Like, oh, okay, now I'm an integrator and I got to start squashing my ideas and start making things happen.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep. That makes sense. That makes sense. Go ahead, Jesse. Sorry.
I'm going to say I think those are some great insights, and to me the quote that always sticks with me when you talk about the visionary versus the integrator, right, is they both need each other, although they might not want to admit it at times if it's different people. But and I'm going to probably butcher the quote as well, but I think it's a Sun Tzu quote that says from The Art of War that says tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. Right. And so if you don't have the visionary driving strategy and you just have a bunch of integrators doing tactics because they got to do the stuff and the things, it's a thing of you're automating and doing process just to do process, and it's not really serving strategic function in the business. So I think those should both inform each other.
Let's break this down a little bit for our MSP audience that's listening, right? Because like these are lots of really big concepts, right? And it's probably pretty foreign to some of our smaller MSP audience that might only have 2 or 3 people, or maybe even just a solopreneur MSP, right? So, you know, it sounds big and scary. It sounds like a complete waste of my time. I just want to be the integrator. I just want to get crap done. I want to fix stuff. But how can we break this down in a small enough chunk so that MSPs can start to actually reap the benefits of shifting left and having things in place?
I call this the practical conversation. You know, what is practical for what I'm doing? Because I'm trying to get stuff done every day. So first of all, there is strategy is not better than execution, and execution is not better than strategy. We have to have both. And for the smaller size, I actually tend to recommend focus on execution first. You don't have to. So having some strategy, and the reason I say that is because when a consultant like me talks about strategy, we want to sell you something. We want you to spend your time somewhere. We want you doing something specific, perhaps that feels nebulous or not very beneficial right now. And that's not what I want from you, because when you're small, I feel like that strategy is pretty clear in your head still.
See, yeah, you know, I'm going to be the devil's advocate here, right? So one of the hardest things that I had to learn, but what was the most efficient things that I had to learn when I was dealing with this big government framework, and that was every time I kind of went and did a thing, I had, well, at that point it was Microsoft OneNote. I had a OneNote tabbed appropriately. Now I use Polygon, but I had a OneNote tabbed appropriately, and I wrote down 1 or 2 key sentences. So, for example, go enable 2FA on the firewall. Great. Grabbing some screenshots as I'm actually in plot, like it wasn't organized, but it was the makings of becoming operationally efficient, right? So this is, you know, the ideal world. We all have multiple monitors. I'm doing a thing here. Keep a thing over here to put notes in while you're doing it, or do it in your ticket system, your PS. Like, the point that I'm trying to get at is just like in a kitchen, clean as you go, document as you go.
Tim, so how do you, so I worked in a SOC, and was it Jira Confluence is like the documentation engine for Jira. It would always get outdated, right? Like people would document processes, and then I think they had to revisit it, right? So like, how do you build some kind of, you know, culture or process, or, you know, a process of a process, as you said?
Well, I was going to say that goes back to Alan's point, having a process of a process, right, Alan?
Well, actually, the culture is the last piece, because so I would challenge. There is no way for a process to get outdated if you're following it every time. Because in order to succeed, you have to stop and update it. So this comes back to culture of process, and allow me to give you 3 quick definitions. A process is a series of steps that leads to a particular result. We write them so we get a particularly positive result, right? My definition of documentation is simply writing down your decisions. And a process is a decision you've made. A policy is a decision you've made.
Like that.
And lastly, I always thought of culture as this nebulous concept, and then I looked it up to write my book because I was getting confused. I was like, oh, it's actually quite simple. Culture is just a collection of habits that your team have.
Yep.
So we have to have the habit of following the process as written.
Yeah.
And to do that, that means that A, we have to do it ourselves. B, all corrective actions within your company. And when I say corrective, it doesn't have to be disciplinary, right? It can be coaching. All of them have to be tied to your process. Hey, Tim, I see we had this result that wasn't right. Here's the process that goes with it. Let's talk about it together. Maybe we need to fix it. And that has to happen every time. My favorite story is I call him my new guy story. He's not that new anymore. Ben joined us last year, my new consultant. And, we were doing the onboarding and he's learning great. And then he starts asking me questions more offline as we're further down his tenure. And I would always answer him like, oh, here's the process and here's what it means to me. And then it was about 3 months in, he says, hey, Alan, I want to let you know that I had this question, but I realized you always answered with a process. I looked it up and I found it. Thank you. That was a win.
Yeah. It's a good feeling.
What we did was new employees, like the level of documentation basically is directly correlated with the level, like the speed of their onboard, right? Because they come on board, they read the documentation, and sometimes we'd say, hey, what was wrong in there? Right?
Yeah.
Go update it.
Yeah.
That's obviously, it's great if you have a steady cadence of new onboards and new hires. But, in absence of that, like I said, I've had a problem, obviously, with documentation getting stale. Well,
so you kind of triggered an idea here as well. I also find a very common mistake we make, especially in IT, is there's a difference in a training document and an SOP, standard operating procedure. My SOPs, I want clear, concise, and assume you know what the heck you're doing.
Right.
Training, I can teach you all the screenshots and how to work stuff. But if you're going to fill this role, you have to know how to work stuff. Here are the 8 steps you need to remember to do in order. And that's it.
Yeah, right.
Back to the training doc.
That's awesome.
Talk about videos there, because it sounds like standard operating procedure, and not a big fan of videos. Okay.
Well, part personal preference. I am a terrible video consumer. I'm always on the phone calls. I'm always doing these things. I don't have time to watch a video or listen to audio. I scan text much better myself.
Same here.
And for videos, again, great for training, not great for an SOP.
Yeah.
You want a quick follow, remember how to do this, not learn how to do this.
I want to give a quick, as we're talking about this, something that I've started using has been very helpful for what Tim was talking about and what Alan's talking about is, and I know we don't plug vendors, but I don't get paid anything. It's a tool I use, Scribe. Have you heard of that?
Scribe. Yep.
Yeah, it works. I mean, it's great because like you said, Tim, you go do something and you've got it immediately documented and at least it's there and you can put it in the knowledge base. So that's been helpful for me.
Right. It really goes back to like making it a habit. And how do you make it a habit? You build a culture around it to become a habit, right?
Right.
And building a culture is not scary. So it's consistently referencing the documentation, especially as a manager.
Yeah, good stuff.
I think
go ahead.
No, go ahead, Tim.
No, I'm good.
Okay. No, I was gonna say, I think, I like one thing we kind of circled but didn't hit on exactly is how do we apply this, right? Tim, back to your question. And I think something to keep in mind and that I, as a perfectionist, I've had to learn is just in time process building, right? Like we can take in the law of diminishing returns. Like if we're working on this process for process sake and we're not using it, how beneficial is it really? But the first time we go do it, we go through it, we take the notes, we use Scribe, we use whatever, we get a rough process. And then as people iterate, they improve it. So it's that just in time process development, I think, can be really helpful to balance that line between application and theoretical, right?
Yeah. I love the fact that you used one of my favorite words, and that's iterate.
Governance.
Governance.
Right? So
Governance.
it's funny because, I think maybe I'm putting words in our audience's mouth, but I feel like a vast majority of MSPs feel maybe ill-equipped, right? Like, I have to nail the document right first.
Right.
Because we're ones and zeros, bits and bytes, and tech nerds, like I have to fix the problem once and for all, rather than the iterative process.
Yeah.
Probably the biggest shitstorm I ever created on Reddit was making the assertion publicly that I rather have a bad process than no process.
Yeah. I did the same mistake on why don't MSPs standardize on Google, but that's a whole nother episode.
Oh, wow.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I get it.
Yeah, I
I'm
love
saying
that.
something somewhat sensational because I've only got so many words and so much attention to give it. But I am basing that based off human natures. We will fix it if we follow it. We're not going to blindly execute a bad process. And I think so many people are dealing with, frankly, employee problems that they're not handling.
Right.
And so they feel like their processes have to make up the difference, and that's not how it's supposed to be. We still have to hire good, smart people. I just think we can dial back experience with good SOPs.
Yeah, Tim, talk a little bit about, like, so the part of like punitive measures of SOPs and like the fear around that, right? Like, I would imagine from your past Big Four Deloitte experiences, that did they approach this from like, if you don't do this, this will happen at all, or was there anything kind of in your previous work history around that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so behind the scenes, I sent you kind of the 4 different personality types.
Yeah.
And they kind of fit into those visionary integrator buckets. Oh, you pulled it up. Which, I don't think I'll do this justice, but as we set up teams, right, as you got put on a job or some kind of consulting or advisory relationship, you would, you'd meet these people for the first time, and people would just come out and say from the beginning, like, hey, like, you kind of would go through these things and go through training and basically put into one of these 4 buckets. So you'd be able to kind of say, oh, we've got, a pioneer here and a driver, an integrator, and a guardian, right? And it would be clear who was going to kind of do what things on that job, or, on that advisory relationship. So that was just an interesting thing I found from working, at a big firm like that. And this is available online as well. But that's kind of what I learned from there. I wouldn't say there was necessarily like punitive things, Tim, but I thought it was just a great way to train employees to work together and really kind of, take roles as things go on. So I don't know how much of that would apply to an MSP, just because roles are, there's engineers and sales and typical help desk people, right? Like, kind of in security, right? Like, there's people wear certain hats. But I think there's certainly a parallel here when we're talking about process, right? And documentation, and shifting left, right, Tim? Like, clearly, when you talk about, and we don't want to plug any vendors here, but something you're working on, you built a little bit of a platform or a process for, a lot of policy is documentation, but it's affecting, your day-to-day work, right? Like, you have to use MFA, or, we're gonna only allow you applications to do your job, or, your screen's gonna lock out after 30 seconds, or whatever, right? Like, all these different things. Or if there's an incident, go talk to Mark and she'll talk to Sheila, or, what's the order of operations? So there's all these SOPs and procedures and policies, Tim. So there's clearly a great parallel there, in kind of what you built and like what you've been a part of over, 20, 40 years, I guess, in terms of compliance.
Yeah. So, and again, I'm not going to talk about me and our stuff, but the reality is that process can be in every instance of the business unit, right? So MSPs hear a lot of stuff. They spend thousands and thousands of dollars a month to be part of sales groups and marketing groups and like all the and what's the one thing they all say? Build a playbook, build a sales playbook, build a document to follow for your sales program, right? So it doesn't even have to be cybersecurity or compliance related. Like the fact that you're building playbooks for sales or for marketing and maybe HR, right? I guarantee you some of the stuff that a lot of MSPs, I guarantee you have a password reset document someplace. I guarantee you have a how to set up or onboard a new client or a new user of a client, right? Whether it's in your brain or on paper, we're suggesting get that crap on paper. Put a process, right, Alan? Put a process in a policy that says, here's how we normalize this in our business, even if I'm an MSP of one.
Agreed. When you introduced this topic, I also heard a possible topic of, can you be over processed?
Yeah.
Can you make it bad? And the answer is absolutely you can. I've seen it.
Yeah.
Diminishing returns, right? Like just write down everything. No,
right, because then you have a process for everything you do, and you might hit 1,000 processes a day, and that number in it of itself isn't the bad part. It's how we treat it. And my solution to that has been to don't forget the meta, don't forget the overarching principles. So we have core values. It's more than this little thing you write down to satisfy your business plan. Core values should be your ultimate process. I'm going to use a bad word. There's only 2 ways to get fired. Failure to live up the core values and failure to follow processes. So I always remember the core values. Plus, when I write job descriptions, my internal job descriptions are 2 to 3 sentences about your job, 2 to 3 key processes, and 2 to 3 key performance indicators, KPIs.
Right.
And the purpose for keeping it so short is it needs to encompass the all.
Mm-hmm.
That job description is written in such a way that you don't have to say other duties as assigned. A help desk member's job is to solve client issues utilizing our ticket system.
Right.
That's it. If they're roughly doing that and following your key process of working tickets and perhaps triaging tickets, maybe time entries.
Right.
That's 3. That's it. It's the whole job. The rest are details. We got to focus on the big picture, helping clients, solving their issues.
Yeah, I love that.
Exactly.
I think
so.
As you said, that diminishing returns as well, Alan. Like, there's got to be a opening for innovation, right? Or like does this process suck? Right? Because we've always done it this way.
Yeah. So
do we need to keep doing it this way?
So if you have the successful culture process and you're worried about a piece, what should happen is that your team becomes aware that, wait a minute, this process isn't quite living up to our core values, which maybe includes continuous improvement or things like that. And therefore they can document or at least justify why they didn't follow that process to a higher power of the core values. So that's why I love justifying it up at the high level. I even write this document called Ways to Succeed. And it's usually like 9 to 13 points that here are some common behaviors that justify our core values.
Nice.
Little things like, if it's not in your ticketing system, it didn't happen. If it's not in your documentation system, it doesn't exist.
I have a famous slide that I use all the time, and it says, if it's not written down, it doesn't exist, but yet you're still held accountable.
Nice. And it's to help keep that bigger picture. It's also the importance of the business plan. Our business plans have 3 sections: identity, direction, and objectives. Everybody in the company should know who we are, who we stand, what we stand for.
Yes.
Where we're headed. And if they can show me at any point in time that they're making those things happen, I have a lot more forgiveness.
Yeah.
I'm feeling a lot of EOS here.
I got a great
process.
great like movie scene. Saving Private Ryan, right? Tom Hanks walks up with his troops. They come up on a radar installation, and they're like, "This isn't our mission. Like, screw that. We're not going to go attack that thing and get shot and killed or like whatever." And he's like, "Our mission's to win the war. Like, are you with me or not?" Right?
Right.
So don't let process get in the way, as you said, that the company mission.
Well, that's the thing too, is that, you know, coming from a Trunk Slammer MSP and having helped build that to like a 70-person MSP, I've seen all versions of this, right? And so to our shame, we at the beginning had all of our documentation Word docs on the S drive, shared drive on the network.
Wait a minute, you guys, you have an S drive too? Does everybody have an S drive?
I think
I thought I was really unique 20 years ago, and I'm like, I'm gonna make an S drive.
But the point of it's support, right? Service or whatever.
Shared.
Shared. But new people would come in and they couldn't find something, and people would be like, "It's on the S drive."
I hear the go look on the S drive.
Yeah. And we moved to Confluence and things got better and our culture got better. And so I've seen that happen. And so, you you kind of cringe when you think you actually said that to somebody, it's on the S drive. And so it's process is only as good as its accessibility and its applicability, right? So if it's a low barrier of usage, it's going to get followed. It's going to do what Alan's saying. But if it's hard to change or update, you're going to find that it's less adopted because humans will take the path of least resistance most times. So you make the process the path of least resistance. That's a good meta principle to live by, to use Alan's terms. I wanted to.
I got another good movie quote there, but I'm not going to go there.
I was going to say, so this S
drive. I'm going. The Hangover, and he's like, they're at the hospital, and he's like, "Can you tell me how to get to like where the wedding was, like the church?" And he's like, "Oh yeah. It's halfway between Get a Map and." Go look at the S drive. Yeah.
There's a wonderful website. Let me Google that for you. I love
it.
Oh yeah. It's basically the acronym there.
Are you sure S drive doesn't stand for SharePoint? Where documents go to die.
Right.
Now, I will defend the S drive, by the way. I think with the proper process and the right structure and a little better attitude, then go find it yourself.
Yeah.
The S drive can be just as good as SharePoint or IT Glue or Hoodoo or Confluence. I'm running one business in Confluence now. I'm running one business on SharePoint and another business in IT Glue right now. And they are all working as I would hope they would.
And
so I feel like you need to have a cohesive process in place so that you're running all the businesses as efficient as possible across one SharePoint, one Confluence, one Polygon, one whatever.
Well, in my case, my business is unconnected, so it's better to have a separate.
I want to hear about those processes.
I want to shift gears real quick and talk. We've been, again, it's what we do as technical people, right? As we talk about help desk and process and go find S drive. Lord forgive me for that. But,
I'm docking your pay.
But I think it's just as important to apply these principles on either side of exit and entry points in the business. And what I mean by that is marketing, sales, and accounting, right? So Alan, you could probably tell us, but just anecdotally, I mean, what percentage would you say of MSPs actually have a documented sales funnel process? I mean, it's probably not many, right?
Well, it's not many, and it's frankly because not many of them even have an unwritten sales process. I mean,
right.
Again, as Mr. Golden said earlier, we all have a process. Whether it's written down or not or consistent is a different story. And so many IT firms are just not doing sales. They'll take things that land on them. They have a high closing rate because they're referrals.
Right.
And if they're happy with that, great. It's probably 20% of our clients are focusing any effort on actually managing sales and marketing.
Yeah. Well, and I'll just tell you, that's for a founder who is technical and that's not their primary job function. I would argue that that's the most important thing to have documented because you know how to do it, but you don't have as many reps. And so you're more prone to errors and leaks in that funnel. So having that bullet point, do this, then this, then this is super helpful at that time.
Well, even at Eureka, the first process I wrote for myself was monthly invoicing.
There you go.
Because I knew roughly how, but there were several screens to go to, and I would go to the wrong screen the first. I'm like, oh, other screen.
Right.
And I wrote my 8 bullet points, followed it, and then it was down to 5 minutes instead of a half hour.
Yep. And now you can hand it off to somebody, right?
I did that a long time ago. And automated.
And that's really the key. So, Alan, what you really just described is the whole point of doing these kinds of exercises is number one, reducing human error, right? Missing steps along the way, and being able to have something repeatable that is always iterated. And then, as Jesse said, pass the buck, right? So, right? Like, so you can focus more on what you do well. Like, I shouldn't be dealing with invoicing. Like, ABC 1, 2, 3 done, hand that off and say, here's how I've done it. It's probably not right. Your job is to look at this, follow it, and fix it.
Yeah, and let me what you said is 100% correct. Let me reframe it for you, because the number one pain point I get with prospects coming in is I'm tired of babysitting these morons. And I hear those exact words, sometimes with more profanity, when talking to an MSP owner. And so I feel like processes that do those things you just said, what you're actually doing is setting clear expectations, perhaps for the first time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And suddenly you have less morons than you think you have. Now, chances are you still have one because you let it go this long. But let me think. We can fix this.
Doesn't sound like the best culture.
Well, I think like I've got a bit of a working theory is that most problems in technology come down to bad communication, right? And so when you level set and practice, again, what I call for us nerds, TCP communication, right? ACK communication. This is what I expect. Is this what you heard? Repeat it back to me. Okay, now we both agreed on that session. And once those are set, it's really easy to have a good culture because people know what's expected of them. And I think for the most part, they want to give that, right?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's Jesse, like working from home, remote, hybrid, whatever, like stakes are higher, right? In terms of those processes and following them. And as you said, it's usually a communication problem and the lack of context when texting. Yeah. Friends and family, like texts have gone, misunderstood for sure, right? So
text is the fastest way to be misunderstood.
Yeah. Well, I think you just hit on a great point, Tim. And I'd like to hear Alan's take on this. What have you seen or what processes have had to be changed or maybe enhanced as this shift to remote work has happened? Absolutely. Or is it not really that much change? And if you have good process, you shouldn't have to have that much of a shift. I mean,
I'm going to go with less shift was required because keep in mind that our industry, particularly, we've been using, Slack, Teams, or other communication platforms, VCS, for decades.
Right.
Those channels are already getting noisy pre-lockdown, pre-remote work.
True.
And we have some of those same problems today.
Mm-hmm.
Our Eureka process was recently bought by Gozenta. I was on Teams there in Slack, and oh gosh, I hate Slack sometimes. It's great for communicating, but we have to realize it's not great for tasks.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
So we try really hard to make sure that everybody knows if it's in Slack, it never happened.
Mm.
And so look for those outputs. I mean, if we ask for something to happen, look for that to end up in your ticketing system or your project management system, and then it's handled. Otherwise, it's just a conversation.
Right.
Some of the things that we noticed, Jesse, as the whole work from home, right? I'm gonna put two spins on it, right? Because we had one organization that was extremely well documented and extremely organizationally efficient, right? And so when the switch flipped and COVID and blah blah blah, like not a single speed bump, right? People just stopped showing up at the physical location because they had a clearly defined VPN process, a clearly defined easy way to get to the S drive, a clearly defined, and we built those norms in the business. So they like literally overnight, not a speed bump. I look at my other client that was like, I don't even have cell numbers. I can't text people. I can't tell them like, don't come in. I can't. And it was complete chaos for weeks and weeks, despite our best effort as an MSP to put in processes in place. It really honed in on the, oh, we probably should have listened to you. Like, can you help us now? Not that I'm the expert, but when I compare and contrast, like, one particular locate, like absolutely not a beat. The other one, it took us weeks, maybe even months to be able to get to an effective organization structure that worked remotely.
Has anybody else ever said the words, I get tired of being right all the time?
In my
maybe the back of my head, but yeah, not publicly out loud.
I've started saying it out loud now. I'm just like, okay, Lord.
Never to my wife.
Here we are again.
Never, like Jessica said, never to my wife.
Glass half full guy to always say that. I think I'm.
Well, but Alan, to you say that tongue in cheek and whatnot, but the reality is that, and we'll get into this in a few minutes. The reality is us as MSPs, we're technical geeks, we're ones and zeros. Some of us have really huge egos and take it to the opposite extreme with, I know what I'm talking about. You're dumb. I'm smart. Do it my way or the highway.
Right.
And then you have the other perspective is we're the guy behind the, like, don't talk to me. And so trying to bridge that gap, like Jesse said, the work from home really forced us IT people into trying to have those business conversations and bridge that gap, not letting our ego come in. Like, hey, we know what we're talking about. We've been doing this for years versus I don't want to talk to them. I'm scared. I'm trying to bridge that gap.
Right.
Tim, this might be controversial, but networking and working in the office and security where it was 4 or 5 years ago, let's face it, a lot of small businesses are still like more at risk than they were because they're remote, because they're hybrid, right? Like there's still a big network focus, like, are you inside our walls and castle? Everything's going to be all right. So that may have been that one, a couple months there, but let's face it, like there's still ramifications of kind of where we are today.
Right. That's because they don't have the right processes in place to put up their digital borders.
I was just going to say that. I mean, there's security many times or much of the time is a function of quality. We don't always think about it that way, but part of quality is having a process. And so if you don't have a process for wire transfers, if you don't have a process for configuration, standard configuration of your AWS buckets, whatever the case may be, right?
Instead of all the things you can download off my website, by the way. Sorry. I'm going to get kicked out of my own show.
No, you know what though? That's a good resource. So I think, people go download those things, because if you don't have them, go get a template from Tim and start using it. And to Alan's point, start actually using it and updating it as you use it. And before you know it, you're going to have this custom built process for your business that you really didn't have to do that much work to get, other than change your mindset a little bit, So,
and to give
Tim, we didn't tell you that your banner's backwards the entire show. I just noticed it. So you kind of just got kicked out like 45 minutes ago. Anyway.
Find my dyslexia. What are you talking about?
Helen, what were you going to say?
I don't even remember anymore because it was also driving me nuts. To encourage people to get started, there is a such thing as critical mass.
Yeah.
And it's not even 80% of the way there. It's more like 30-40% of the way there as you start documenting processes, building your library of processes.
Oh, I love this.
It gets easier. I probably only had 30-40% of the processes documented or less when our new support agent started a few months ago. And we hired somebody who was very familiar with processes when he joined, and he had enough to get him started that he also knew how to fill in the gaps. Yeah. Now he's like, hey, this is missing. Can you find it? I cannot. Can I write it? Yes, please do. It's good. Absolutely. And then we just keep iterating that process and finding more gaps to fill, and it's been great.
That is such a great point. I'm glad you brought it up because I agree. And you know what you can do is you can make people jealous, right? With process. It's a favorite tactic of mine in larger organizations. It's harder to just turn the ship, right? It's like turning an aircraft carrier versus turning your twin Mercury engine ski-boat, right? So, but what you can do is take a group of people who have that critical mass, a small group, and start those improvements and those process changes. And all of a sudden things are working really well for that group. And people go, hey, what are you guys doing? I want some of that, you know? And then it begins to build out and you get this groundswell. And before you know it, you've really changed the culture there. So I love that point. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and I'll add a couple of execution points for this culture piece.
Yeah.
We do have a process meeting every week. It's only 30 minutes long. We discuss what processes have changed, or does anybody need one? Because for culture, management has to be involved every day. You don't have to write any processes, but you have to always pull people back to, hey, outcome didn't work out. Let's look at the process. Talk about the processes. Congratulate people on processes getting done. I think there's a long way to building that culture.
Right. And, you know, this is something that I've not implemented, but as I think about it, creating an initiative to remove or kill old processes. If you're in an organization that's facing some of that over process issue, I'm just thinking here, you could do in that meeting, like, what are some processes we should get rid of that aren't important to us anymore? And maybe you might not find that many, but it would be an interesting thought experiment, I think, to change the culture around that.
We had to do that, right? Because when we went remote and we were still doing tape-based backups at that point, we had a process for, you know, our support staff, our team to come in every morning, and somebody was assigned to swap the tapes, put it in the fireproof safe, update the log. Like, now we're not going in the office anymore. Number one, how are we dealing with backups? Number two, like, I don't need a process for changing the tapes every morning because we're not doing that. So, you know, it's also key to make sure that, you know, if it has to go, it should go.
So three ways I've seen to kill a process. One, please don't start there. Don't worry about your garbage. Implement your process, and when you use something, update the title to match your process.
There you go.
That'll begin to separate what's actually been accessed versus what hasn't been accessed in a while. At some point down the project, they'll stand out. And when you have that great organization of recipes, you're also going to see those stand out. So that's point two. When they stand out, you start asking the question, like, wait a minute, we haven't used this since we started this project a year ago. Do we still need it? And third, depending on your tool, you can set in many places expiration dates to cause like a recertification. This process is valid. Set it for a year or two out.
Right.
And then as they pop up, check, is it still valid? If not, you can delete it, or maybe it needs to be edited.
Yeah.
If only there was a tool that did that. Oh, wait. So we're coming up on the last 5 minutes here. Tip, this has been really, I mean, I could talk process all day long, right? And we all know that. But we tend to try to kind of leave our show. We're getting a little bit better with, you know, a 1 or 2 minute, like, key takeaway, right? And so I'm gonna start over here with Mr. Schnur, Jim, and tell me, Mr. Crivello, what is one key takeaway that we can give to our MSPs today from a process?
Well, I think, as Alan mentioned, it's really that size of the company, right? So, like, once you're over that second, third, fourth, fifth employee, you really need process to scale and be efficient. So
process to scale. Good. How about you, my friend Jesse?
Yeah, I think just so many great takeaways, but if I had to say one thing that stuck with me, I would say make your processes accessible and applicable, so that people actually use them. Right.
Nice. Good stuff. And obviously, Mr. Allen.
So many. Wrote a book about it. I would say start simple, and keep in mind simple is not easy. So simple could be your process. Grab a template. It could be creating your core values, just to have some management framework in the absence of all the details. But anything is better than a blank page, and we can iterate from there.
Yeah.
You stole my thunder, which is what I say, and I said it earlier. it's not written down, it doesn't exist, but yet you're still held accountable. So yeah, this has been a really great session. Alan, thank you so much for coming on. I know we have just like 3 or 4 minutes left. We want to talk about our special show coming up next week. Tim, maybe you could share a little bit about our special show coming up next week.
Yeah, no, really excited. Monday, Wes Spencer. I think a lot of our audience knows who he is. Currently at CyberFox, Empath. Worked a little bit in Fifth Wall Insurance. Little company he founded called Perch, which I think is connected to ConnectWise now. Yeah. So really, his experience over the years talking about how to get a seat at the table of your clients, right? Like, how do you bring more than just infrastructure technology, right? Like, how do you start to gain that trust, talk about, how you can help their business outcomes, right? Like, and get that small win, and then just keep moving forward with it and become, that invaluable, not an invaluable vendor, but an invaluable, partner. So,
and then create a process around it.
I was just going to say, if only there was a process for getting a seat at the table. Maybe we could build that out with Wes and Alan and us to build out a process on getting a seat at the table.
Pretty fun.
So, yeah, we're pretty excited. Wes has agreed to come in and do our little network here and kind of talk to us about, actual tangible things around I'm a tech geek. I don't speak business, right? And interestingly enough, MSP Media Network and those in MSP Geek, we just started this whole Books and Bits, this whole book club. And the first book that we did was called Getting Naked. And we just had our first session today at noon. And part of what we talked about there was being able to be vulnerable in those business conversations, right? Being able to have, part of getting a seat at the table is realizing you don't know what you don't know, asking the question, not coming off as the ego IT guy, but coming in as somebody that wants to help their business. And technology happens to be just one way to do that. So we're pretty excited. Wes is good people. Let's see. We've got roughly a minute left. Any parting words? Anything you want to share with anybody? Alan, Tim, Jesse.
On Friday, we have our normal show as well, talking about cyber insurance.
Yay.
Coming on board. So,
who is it?
Andy Runyon and Joseph Brunsman. Great follows on LinkedIn as well. You guys should check them out. Certainly know a lot about how much insurance do I need? What are some of these supplements? It's one of those things you just kind of have to keep your ear constantly to what's going on in insurance. So excited for that one.
Yeah, cyber insurance, I think I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I get tired of it, and then I learn something new from somebody else that has a different perspective. So,
yep.
Yeah, it makes business insurance for a nightclub seem a little bit better.
So, Alan,
more predictable.
Take that last 30 seconds here and tell us about this nightclub. Where is it? I don't drink, but I definitely can't dance. But I might go and hang out. Tell us a little bit about that while we're here.
Well, it's in the town that I live, Squamish, BC, just north of Vancouver. We're actually taking over an existing nightclub, and we're adding a lot earlier hours, adding coffee and lots of zero proof options, trying to appeal to a new demographic in our busting town right now.
Nice. Speaking of zero proof, I just ordered from Amazon this thing the product line is called Ritual. They have a bourbon. They have a bunch of different things, but it's been tasty. So, Oh, Tim left. Okay. So that must mean it's 3:00 and I bet yeah. So anyways, Alan, always a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much. Good luck with the restaurant. The nightclub. Good luck with the new business adventure. We're excited to hear more about it.
Awesome. Thanks so much.